So up next, I'm very pleased to introduce Isaac Sacolick, president of StarCIO. As an authority on digital transformation, Isaac has over 7,000 followers on Twitter, leading him to be named one of HuffPost's top 100 social CIOs in Twitter in 2016. Isaac also maintains an active blog on StarCIO, covering topics for technologists, CIOs, CMOs, and software developers. He specializes in consulting services covering digital strategy, product development, and agile transformation, among others. And he's currently an advisory board member for Stafford and Associates. Isaac's upcoming book, which you can get right over there, Driving Digital, The Leader's Guide to Business Transformation Through Technology, was just released August 24th. Let's welcome Isaac to the stage. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for that. It was great.
Got it.
Let me just grab the green button here. Everybody have a good lunch? Yeah? You're not asleep on me, are you? I've been told my stuff sometimes can get dense. You know, when you talk about transformation, and when I talk about transformation, I try to help people understand how to really implement their strategy and take their dreams and what you're trying to do as a corporation and what you're trying to do as a person and really bring it to reality. And it's not easy. You know, you have an existing way your business is operating. You have an existing way of people working in the organization. And you're trying to try to do something new and different, and you're trying to do it faster than you've done it before, and you're trying to do it probably with more competitors than you've ever had before. And so, you know, that's my story that I'm going to interweave into our workshop today. It's a big set of topics in my book. And so let me tell you how I got there. I started my career as a startup CTO. And this was in the 90s, mostly in media, but also in biotech. And so the things that you see happening in the Valley today, moving really fast, lots of software companies I started off doing early in my career. But I chose to pivot my career about 10 years ago and decided that I wanted to go work in bigger companies and help them take their existing businesses and modernize it with technology, modernize their user experiences, find new ways of growing their business, and really turn around their businesses from legacy operations that were going to get disrupted over the next 10 years. So I was a CIO at Business Week magazine. I was a CIO at a company called Dodge Data and Analytics. That's a construction data company. And then I went off to become the CIO at a financial services company called Greenwich Associates that does market research on banks. And all of those things had the same thing in common. Their existing business wasn't operating well. They were getting new competitors. The way they were delivering their products and services were different or needed to be different over the next 3 to 5 years. The way they were running their organizations needed to be different. And what I was finding over the course of that is that to make those businesses successful, I was putting in a lot of the same programs, a lot of the same types of technologies, a lot of the same types of practices, working with people very differently. And along that journey, I started writing. My blog's been around for 10 years, that I've been talking about everything from Agile to data science programs to low-code platforms for about 10 years now. And so that led me to write the book and to start doing consulting services around that. So that's my journey into digital transformation and how I got to doing what I'm doing now. But to really talk about digital transformation, we need to have a baseline about what that means. And so I'm going to spend a little bit of time on that. You might have seen other people speak about this. But where I like to start from is, if you're going to transform, you have to know something about what you're transforming to. And I call that your digital business. And it has certain elements to it that are common between different companies and how they operate. So I like looking at the experts first. And what differentiates digital transformation to some of the things that you were probably doing a decade ago is digital transformation includes the blending of both physical and digital worlds. So it's not just about a website selling something in retail. It's about an immersive experience between what you're doing in the store and what you're doing online. It's not just about building gadgets out with electronics. It's putting gadgets out that are IoT enabled, that can connect what you're doing in your home with something that you want to have information available through the internet. So first is, I think what's digital is a blending of both physical and digital worlds. The second thing, if you contrast it to a decade ago, you built a website, you wanted people to come, you did SEO, you SEM'd it, you got people to come to your website, and that was your channel to interact with your customers. If you look at today, to be successful working with a digital native customer or digital native prospect, you need to be participating in a much larger ecosystem to bring people in, to bring third-party services in, to bring data in, to showcase your data out. So everything from things like building APIs out or building experiences that leverage data from third parties, that's all part of an ecosystem that goes beyond your organization's capabilities and is really part of a digital experience. But the last one is really the most important one that really differentiates digital from other transformations and what we're going to spend a lot of time talking about today, which is to be successful doing this, your entire organization is going to be operating differently over the course of the next 3 to 10 years as new practices and new capabilities get pushed out and become democratized, and things that were workflows before become collaborative experiences, things that were tidied into an office or a cubicle become things that you can work remotely, things that where you have to be a lot more mobile around the way you're doing things. Things tend to be more metric-oriented and KPI-oriented. And this, 3 things are the elements of what goes into both digital business and your transformation to get there. Now, this might still be some abstract, so I want to bring this a little bit more down to earth in terms of what this means in some practical sense, and maybe bring you some examples. One of the things that I talk about when you think about, what does this look like in our world? You don't have to invent the wheel to do that anymore. There's lots of examples, probably in your industry and outside of your industry, that you can draw on and say, well, how did they do that? Or how are they operating? Or what can I learn from this experience? And so these are some of the attributes that I look at when I see a real digital business. Starts with your business model, right? Used to buy everything, and now there's a lot more through recurring revenue streams and through subscriptions. Those are things that enable a business to continue to grow. It also provides a different relationship to the customer, right? You are no longer just selling them one piece and asking them to come back to the store another time. You're selling them, I saw an example of Porsche is now offering a subscription service. So you can go rent your Hertz at the airport, or you can have a subscription service with Porsche and get your car whenever you want. Digital companies tend to look to ways to be asset light, right? So leverage third parties and leverage ecosystems to deliver services, and the poster childs for those are Uber and Airbnb. They tend to disrupt existing cost structures. So things that were expensive before, like software development, is now becoming cheaper and cheaper because the platforms are getting richer. Things like infrastructure in the data center are getting cheaper and cheaper because you can now do things on the cloud. Things that were standalone applications are now things that you can download in an app store. So cost structures are being challenged by people who are coming up with new services that can compete with an existing environment. They need to be omni-channel, meaning you're reaching customers through both digital and through physical worlds to bring them into your store. My favorite example around that is Starbucks and their mobile platforms. You don't have to wait online. You just order on your phone and their coffee is sitting right there. It's great service. The workplace is also changing, and that has a lot of different avenues to it. So, entire corporations built on people working remotely at WeWork and working at home. entire organizations that are signing up and doing online courses through services like Udemy and others that offer online training. So the entire workplace ecosystem is different. And then where things get really disruptive is you start looking at the next wave of emerging technologies. These are the big three that I talk about: IoT, particularly in manufacturing, AI in retail, in media, in healthcare, I think it's going to be big, and then blockchain, particularly in financial services. All these things are going to be the new foundations for those new industries. And the only way you're going to get there to leverage them is by putting your company through a transformation where you have a software capability, you have a data capability, you have collaboration, and then you can start taking advantage of some of these new technologies. And if you don't, you know what ends up happening. The startups enter the space and they figure it out for you, okay? This is an example that I lived through of what happens if you do not transform. So in the 90s, I was a CTO of a newspaper SaaS company, helping them move their content from print to online. And our company started with a product in classified ads, and we helped them. Instead of looking through the paper or thousands and thousands of ads, we were looking at loading their content into a search engine, allowing you to use keywords and faceted search to find cars and jobs and real estate. We had AI, natural language processing, to pull this stuff out of classified so you knew what you were searching on. And then we went to the market with the most important product, the ability to take an online ad. And disrupt their call centers and let you buy an ad online instead of just buying it in print. Of the 1,400 newspapers that had signed up to use our platform for selling digital, only about 20 of them used it as a sales channel, okay? It's not the only thing that hurt newspapers over the course of time. They had Craigslist, they had eBay, they had Cars.com, they had Monster, lots of other niche websites that came and really disrupted their model. And that was just the first wave of the disruption. It eventually went to Facebook and Google, where most of the advertising dollars ended up going. So this is what happens when you're totally disrupted, okay? And this is a 10-year cycle. In the few years that I was involved in the newspaper industry, they actually looked at the internet as a good thing. Their markets were expanding. It was a new channel for them. They didn't think their brands were going to be attacked as badly as they were. And over the course of time, obviously, that statement didn't hold, right? And the disruptive factors of all these new platforms, building up their brands and their capabilities, made it very difficult and still makes it very difficult for them. So this is why we're doing the things we're doing. We don't want to suffer this fate. There's good value in all the organizations that you work for, but the things that you're doing today need to change over time. One last slide on digital. If you think this is happening in just a relatively few industries, I can give you cite examples in every one of these industries where things are changing fairly rapidly. I think things will be more disruptive in certain industries over in others. I think financial services, for example, will face a huge disruptive factor, but regulation and trust potentially could be on their side. Right? Are you going to go to a small bank and put your life savings in that isn't FDIC insured? You're probably not going to do that. All right, so they still have the upper hand in their ability to invest. They still have the upper hand and the ability to take care of blockchains, but they're also losing out on the retail side of it. Healthcare, I think, is going to be a big area over the next 10 years in terms of changing the patient experience, leveraging data that you collect on your devices and at home to supplement what they can collect inside a hospital or a doctor's office, giving you access to more specialists. So I think in the entire debate of how this country in particular handles healthcare, the big question is, how is technology going to lower costs and improve experiences and improve healthcare and find a way to balance that out? Okay, that's the story that I'd like to see happen over the next 10 years. I will tell you that transformation is also not easy, because as soon as somebody says in your organization, we're going to start transforming, what you're going to see and feel, and what I've participated in, is what I call the executive land grab. It means who's going to own things like the program, who runs this program, who has budget that's going to lose budget to be able to invest in the new technologies and the new practices that the organization needs. When we talk about experience and user experience, who ultimately owns those decisions about brand, and all the way down to what colors and what fonts and what styles are using on the website. And then even in the technology organization, there's big debate over who runs the Agile program and who runs the DevOps program. All right, so very early on in a transformation program, there's often a lot of this debate that happens in corporations that starts at the top and works its way down to the rest of the organization. So what I'm here to tell you is, even though you might see this, in some cases you might feel this, there are ways around this by turning the transformation on its head and starting on the bottoms up. Okay? How do you enact change as somebody working in the organization that sees all these things and wants to make an impact? Okay? And that's essentially what you need to do, right? That's what this picture is about. Sitting on several management teams, looking at not only the face of what is transforming, but the three organizations I was working on were also turnarounds. Their existing businesses were already being disruptive. They were losing market share. They were losing revenue over time. They were feeling that while they needed to transform. And to the executives sitting to the left or right of me, it felt like they didn't really know what to do. Okay, they were paralyzed with too many things that looked like long-term investments, looked like difficult things to change in their organization, looked at products and services that were going to get hemorrhaged over time, and trying to figure out what to do with it. And my job as the CIO, and what I explained to my group is their jobs working in the organization, was to do experiments, change the thinking from big, difficult, hard things to simple things that we could do on a month-to-month, quarter-to-quarter basis, and start showing what was working and what was not working, and have people align that with the things that were working. Okay? I aligned all those in the book under the concept of smarter and faster. And the reason is that if you move too fast and you're not thinking smart, you're going to end up heading in the wrong direction. If you're smart and you're diligent and you're thought-provoking and you ask too many questions that take a long time to answer, you're going to be really smart, but you're not going to be moving fast enough. And neither of those are good situations. So I think the two dimensions that everybody is operating today is how do you move both faster and smarter at the same time. And I think it comes down to a number of programs that organizations need to have in place. Okay? First, it starts with understanding customers and customer experiences, how they're using your products today, what new segments are more attractive that you might want to go sell into, where are your capabilities might be useful outside of your core programs, and how are you working with your sales and marketing teams to gain more intelligence about what's happening in the field and what's possible in terms of delivering something of new value to your existing customers or potentially new ones that you're not even reaching today. This, it turns out to be something that looks really simple on paper but really hard to execute, because so much of the organization is about taking your existing products and services, manufacturing them, and getting them out to as many customers that you can. So if you go and talk to a salesperson and say, give me more insights every time that you go and visit a customer in a structured way so that after 10 salespeople go visit 100 customers, I can make sense out of these things. Most organizations don't have that capability, even with all the CRMs that are out there. And instituting that is a big practice. The second part of this is understanding the entire organization's portfolio. What are all the things that it is trying to do? Everything that it's trying to plan, everything that it's trying to execute on, everything that it's trying to change in the organization, and having a systematic way of measuring it and managing it. Now, the reason I put this up there is because not that you need to have a sort of global view of everything that's happening, but one of the things that you do find is many organizations don't have the funding or the people to actually change what they're doing and operate the way they are today, right? So everybody's 80%, 90% capacity. I don't have time to go do all of this stuff. And so what I tell their leadership is we need to find that time by taking hours out of things and things that they don't need to do anymore, or things that they should still be doing, maybe a little bit less of, or maybe doing things that are a little bit more efficient. So when I assign a task to a group, and we're going to talk about how I go about doing that soon, but when we assign a task to a group and they came back and say, I can only sign up for 3 out of the 10 things, or I signed up for 10 things and I only delivered 3 of those things, we have a conversation about what prevented the entire thing from being completed. And inevitably what comes out is a bunch of things that's just low value, things that aren't important anymore. And we have that conversation. We find ways to either simplify or shed things that are no longer needed. So that's the discussion on portfolio. On Agile, we're going to spend a big chunk of the workshop on Agile, so I'm going to skip that for now. We're also going to talk about data in this. So how do you democratize both data so that much like the development can be transferred outside of an IT organization, data analysis and data visualization can leave the world of a data scientist or an IT shop and make that available to the organization to be smarter and deliver insights. So I think that's also important. And then finally, I think this concept of workforce enablement, citizen development, how do you empower the organization to really run differently, to deliver decisions differently, to have a different work-life balance. I think that's all part of being smarter and faster. And that's essentially everything that's covered in the book. So you're getting a synopsis of it right here. So let's start with strategy, okay? And one of the things I like to talk about is this notion that strategy is a one-time event, that you're going to sit in a room for 3 months and do a bunch of offsites, come up with a strategy, and that it's going to be a living, how do you take that one-time event and make it into a living and breathing thing, okay? Because we know it needs to evolve over time. It needs to change with things that you've learned about that are more important, and it needs to shed things again that it turns out didn't materialize the way you thought it would be. So this is a complex framework that I'm going to try to take you through. This is the only time I've ever shown this slide, but I wanted to be able to show you how to answer that question. And what it really comes down to is when you break down strategy and you're going to start putting it into execution, you're naturally going to divide them up into initiatives, different things that you're going to assign to different groups to go after that align usually with more than one strategy at a time, okay? What you're seeing across the top is you take any single initiative at any given time, and it's either in early planning stages or it's in its later stages where you've built something, you've come up with a new practice, you've come up with a new service, and now you're trying to realize the transformation effects of it. And everything in between is the execution from getting that to those 2 different points. So remember I said it affects different parts of the organization differently. It's because there are different practices that are really important depending on their stage, and trying to put them into play too early or too late impacts the ability to actually do the transformation at hand. So early on, when you're starting off that initiative, things like a vision statement and proof of concepts and being able to kick off an agile process become really important because you're trying to understand what is going to work in this space. And you're trying to make sure there's an alignment over what you're going after. It leads into things like market analysis, looking at underlying platforms for the technology, and then really the organizational principles around Agile and other things to go and execute. So those are the things that are important for any new initiative to get right up front. But then as you're starting to execute in things like, well, you build a new products and service, how are you going to bring the marketing team on and the sales teams on to figure out how to market and sell this thing? What's the ongoing support that needs to happen with it? What's the pricing structure that's going to be put against this so that we can start making money off of it? What's the organizational change impact so that we know who's going to be doing what to support this product and service? This is essentially why, as you're building more of this, it's really impacting the entire organization. And the art of it is figuring out how to bring in people at the right time to impact the different pieces of it. That last part, the transformation column of here, turns out to be the most important one, right? That's what differentiates a project, something that somebody came up with a business plan on and said, we're going to go make an investment and go build this product and service and bring it to market. And then 2 or 3 years later, even if it's a success, finds out they're managing a legacy product because they didn't continuously invest in it. So the real art of this is not in the first 3 columns, because we've historically known how to build products and build services out and bring them to market. What's different is you need to get the transformation effect, you need to continue to invest in it, you need to continue to listen to customers and figure out how to evolve your product and service. And it turns out these are things that software companies have been doing for a long time, right? Software companies have been doing version after version of their software to keep up with competition, to improve capabilities, to improve user experiences. And so that transformation effect now applies to almost every product and service that needs to go out. And so a lot of figuring out how to execute transformation is how to impact that last column. And to me, that's where Agile comes in. So this is one of the 2 practices I'm going to share a little bit more detail on today. And to me, Agile is really about how do you take customer feedback, regardless of where you are in the stage of a program, and impact what you're prioritizing. That is the heart from a business perspective around what Agile is. From a teamwork, from a way of operating, there's a whole nother side to it as well, right? Getting a multidisciplined team to work together around short-term goals that deliver a longer-term roadmap. But in order for that to actually deliver transformation, you really have to get the customer feedback part of it into the equation and the ability to prioritize into that equation. So we're going to spend a little bit of time to help illustrate that. How many people here do Agile in your organization? Okay, so about a third of the room. Are you doing it only in technologies, or are you also doing it in places outside of technology? How many are doing it outside of technology? There's one, okay. So first thing about Agile is, while its roots are in software development, there are plenty of organizations outside of software that are leveraging its benefits to do the same types of things. Execute as a multiple disciplinary team, have a vision that's stating a long-term roadmap, but execute in small chunks, have demonstrable finished products at the end of a sprint, and the ability to prioritize based on customer feedback, okay? Everything I just said has nothing to do with software, okay? It's just common ways of operating. So what you're gonna see here is essentially Agile applied to pretty much anything. I ran my teams with it. I helped CEOs run their departments with it because ultimately they wanted that same experience of using feedback to really judge and rebuild priorities. How does that work? Right, so we said we're going to start with a strategy, right? It's going to say we're going to go after this market. We're going to improve this area of our product and service. We're going to demonstrate something new about our brand. Could be any one of those things, and that we're just going to call that a strategy because it's not stating how we're going to get there or exactly what we're going to do. And that's going to be the first stage of a transformation exercise that takes that strategy and starts saying, of the things that we can do, we think these 2 initiatives are the most important things that we're going to get started on, okay? And the way we're going to get started on it, what's the first thing we're going to do? We're going to find people who are going to sign up to participate on it, and we're going to draft a mission statement or a vision statement about what it is they're going after and why, and that's how you start a program around this, okay? So let's dive into a single initiative when you get into Agile, okay? Everybody probably knows you operate in sprints, okay? What is a sprint at the highest level? I'm going to prioritize a bunch of things. okay, I'm going to ask the team to tell me what it is that they can get done in that length of time of a sprint. Okay, a sprint could be a week, it could be 2 weeks, it could be a month. It's usually not longer than a month, and it's almost never shorter than a week. But the big part of difference here is we're asking a multidisciplinary team based on a ranked list of things that we want to get done. Of those things, which are number one, which do they understand how to do? And number two, which of those can they get done in the amount of time that they have? Okay, and that's what you're seeing there. Sprint 1 is going to deliver something. Sprint 2 is going to deliver something. Sprint 3 and 4 are going to deliver something. And then you're going to get to the end of that and say, I have something I'm ready to release and put in front of the customers that I had in mind to deliver this to. Okay. And so now you've put maybe an MVP product out. Maybe it's just an email campaign, right? We're going to go reach a new customer segment. We're going to come up with a whole set of new email campaigns. We're going to figure out what that is, and we're going to start launching it and measuring its feedback. Maybe it's an event strategy. I've done this with a marketing group that needed an event strategy for their books. They went out, built some tools around it, and started measuring the impact of different events they did for their books. You get to that first version of how you're operating, and as you're getting close to that, you're realizing, hey, there's some things that I don't have that I want, or there's some things that I'm anticipating that I need to do next, and that becomes your planning for the next phase of this. You can see here that planning for the next phase of this needs to start while you're executing what you're doing right now. So if a sprint is 2 weeks and that's an 8-week program, somewhere around week 4 or week 5, you're starting to figure out what are we going to leave behind that we need to go do next that will come after this. And you start anticipating those things because that then leads into the next 2 sprints of activity that you're going to go execute on, right? And so you're going to jump from finishing one project or one release or one milestone and going into the next set of things and saying, I'm going to do a small minor enhancement. Maybe it's a 2-sprint release around something and improve on that. You're going to do it again, okay, and say, all right, now we're going to focus on the next big thing that we do. And then you're going to regroup and say, are we on track with our strategy? Is this strategy pointing in the right direction, or do we need to reformulate it? Okay, so that's the big difference. You're constantly churning through changes and implementations. You're constantly replanning, and then you're going back and reviewing your strategy. Know the basics of sprint? Everybody here? I got one in the back. I know who does. All right. How does it work inside a sprint? This is the 30-second version. There's a lot of literature out on this. Okay. You come up with a list of things. You go to your cross-disciplinary team. You say to them, which of these things are you prepared to execute on because you know what you're being asked to do? They come back and say, I'm willing to do items 1, 3, 4, and 5. 6 is too much, and 2 I don't understand. Okay, and so they've committed to doing 1, 3, 4, and 5. They're meeting every day in what's called a stand-up. A stand-up is a way of them sharing information about how they're executing on it. They're raising things called blocks and saying, I'm stuck here, I need some help. Or they're saying, I need some help around a technical skill or something around that. But they're meeting daily for 15 minutes, standing up to be able to articulate that very efficiently. At the very end of a sprint, their goal is to be completely done, to demo what they're doing, and then to have a separate meeting at the end of it called a retrospective that says, how can we improve this process? And so maybe they got 1, 3, and 4 done, and they missed on 5, and they're going to talk about what is it about that 5th one that made it difficult that we couldn't execute on. And they will discuss that in the retrospective so they get better as a team as they go on. Okay, so we just went from strategy to how to run multi-initiative programs, and then how to actually execute. But what it turns out, the most important part of this is not how the team is executing around the things that are on the backlog. It's around how you put things on the backlog and how you prioritize these things. So this is a process we actually built at Business Week where once we started executing and making changes to businessweek.com and launching new products, we had everybody coming to our doorstep asking for more and more things. And we needed to find a way to evaluate the most important things and find a way to be able to execute them very efficiently. So this was a 1-week planning sprint. So we had a sprint for executing. We had a separate sprint for planning. The output of the planning sprint was to create the backlog. The output of the execution sprint was to actually get the top things done. In some organizations since then that I advise on, they do it concurrently, so they might have a 2-week sprint, and the same team is planning and the same team is developing or implementing, and they're committing to both planning activities and development activities. In larger organizations, I've had it where a certain group of people are planning and a certain group of people are executing, and those time scales are actually different. So there's a lot of ways to implement this, but what this basically means is, given a list of things that you think you want to do, how does the group prioritize it on value? Okay, and so at Business Week, the way we used to do this is we had the head of sales, the head of editorial, the head of strategy. I forget, there were 3 or 4 others, including myself as the head of technology, listening to a pitch, hey, we want to go do this on the website, and then we would vote on it, right? We would vote on based on what we thought and what we heard was important to the organization and important to customers, and that became a weighted scale, and that would put the item through planning based on its ranked order. When it went into planning, our objective was to take that vision and that idea and break it down into what would go into the backlog. And then we would bring it back to that group again for a second view of it, now that there was some accounting of cost and complexity around what they were asking for. And that's essentially how we ran Business Week. So this is the heart, I think, of transformation programs, because to go from an idea to planning it and executing it, well, that's hard enough. You now need to go from a plan to executing, to another plan to executing, and to continually doing that cycle. And so you have to build a very micro planning program inside your organization to be able to do that. So why Agile and Transformation? Okay, number one, because the data is really important, okay? Data to me is what helps the product owner, the person leading the Agile function, to say why something is more important. It's focused on user stories, and those are things written in the voice of the customer. In a lot of programs, they use estimation. I didn't talk about estimation, but the book covers it. Why do I estimate tasks? Because I want to help a product owner understand what an MVP should look like. So if 10 things look really important to them because every customer wanted them, and they start getting estimates back, they can make better decisions about what to invest in because they know what the complexities are. I have a post on my blog that talks about technical debt. Does everybody know what that means? Okay, technical debt basically means when you build something, and it could be anything, you put something, you build a process, you build a piece of technology, and you know you've cut a corner in order to meet a deadline. You've done something that's out of process or out of spec because you wanted to get in front of customers faster. That's a debt that if you leave it in your production environment, that you want to go back and fix it later on. That's a technical debt. And what I tell organizations is that every organization should be spending a part of what they're doing fixing things, and that's fixing the technical debt, and then doing things called spikes, which is basically R&D. Complete experiments, no guarantees that it will drive value. It could be a POC around a technology. It could be a way to reach a new customer segment, and you're going to go spike around that and see what the impact is going to be. Right? And that's how you end up with a balanced organization around that. Good on Agile? I got one nod here. Yes? Okay. Let's move on to the next area, okay? And to me, this is the heart of what makes it difficult to do the things that we're doing when you're not a software company, right? You're being told you have to win with technology, with data and analytics, okay? where every product and service needs to have an AI component, where businesses are going to fail over the next 10 years until you change the entire company. And in order to solve this, you need to actually operate like a software company. Okay? So every business needs to be a technology business. But when you translate that, most businesses can't afford to do the same things that most of the companies in the Valley are doing, right? When I hear you should adopt management practices that Google has or hiring practices that Facebook has, I'm sorry, I can't afford to do that. I can't compete with them for the talent. I can't operate with them the same way. What's working for the top 4 technology companies today isn't going to work for most organizations. And yet, we have to find better ways to do things with technology and analytics. So we got to find a different way to do it. The Oakland Raiders are going to win games using different techniques than the New York Yankees. Is that a good analogy? I'm from New York. Okay? So I'm going to share some of those. Okay? The first thing is, particularly when we talk about data and analytics, if you're going to go about doing data and analytics by looking for PhD data scientists and quants, that's a really difficult thing to do. They're in high demand. They're expensive. They want to work on the hardest problems out there. And what it tends to make many organizations try to do to fulfill those roles given limited budgets is to find the uber person, somebody who can do data science, statistics, programming, analytics, and convey all the answers to the business person. This is an example for technology where you're looking for someone with CRM and API and all the experiences, because I can only hire 1 or 2 people that has to go out and do all of this stuff. Okay, so we need a different way of finding the right talent. And that leads into where we're going to apply this. Now, this is a picture of Business Week from 10 years ago, almost to the month. And I like showing this slide because it illustrates a lot of things that are wrong. Okay? Now, the first thing people usually say to me is that the fonts and the style of the page, it's just out of whack. Doesn't look responsive. It's the first thing it's too complicated. I had somebody say to me, yeah, that BlackBerry ad looks wrong. That wasn't a BlackBerry ad, it was a story, right? At last, BlackBerry goes Wi-Fi. So that was the most important story to cover by Business Week, followed by AOL's mobile ambition, okay? We're covering all the important things here. And then finally, a talking car. We're really much looking into the future and talking cars as far as we could go in our thinking about what was going to be important in technology 10 years ago. Okay? The most important thing about this page, though, is that nobody went to it. Okay? This is the technology channel of the Business Week website. To get here, you went to the home page, you click technology, and you could see all the technology articles. The technology editor spent 30 to 40% of their time figuring out what piece of content should go into what spot on this page, because they ran the website like they ran a magazine, and that's what they did. They figured out what should go on page 5 and what should go on page 15 and what it should look like, and that's how Business Week was operating in 2007. Doesn't work very well when you have a 6-figure, very smart, very capable editor curating this page that nobody goes to. Okay, and the reason that was happening was, even though we had analytics on the website, nobody was using the data. And nobody was looking at it and saying, geez, all that traffic that is hitting this website are spiders from Google and others spidering the site. What we ended up doing with this page is automating it. We went to the editors, we found out how they made decisions over what content went well. We took it out of a content management system, we put it into a content delivery platform, and this page was computed. And we kept it online because we needed it for SEO. But this is my example of what operating without data looks like, right? $130,000 to $170,000 editor focused on curating a page that was providing no value. That person went on to shifting their role, and we ended up tripling the amount of content that was published. Okay. Let's talk a little bit more why data is important. CEOs are starting to recognize it. Okay, becoming more data-driven is in their top 5 of priorities. They're investing in it. Data and analytics is in the top of their group there. Okay, and the other thing that's of note is that they're not just looking for the results. They're starting to understand that data quality behind that is really important. Okay, here's a trick to how you get somebody in an executive role to understand that data quality is important. Okay, it's very easy to put a bar chart, a graph, a dashboard on top of data. It's very hard to fix the data quality issues underneath it. Put them in the room and let them see the underlying visual of what the data looks like, and they're going to throw darts at it. And just be prepared for the darts with some solutions and ideas on how to fix these things, because that's the behavior change you want to see happen from the top down. You're using your CRM system, the data sucks. How are we going to fix this? We got to get salespeople to put data into the CRM system more proactively, and then it's going to look better, and we're going to have better decisions off of it. If the salespeople aren't putting data into the CRM, you can't really make decisions off of it. Okay, so that was an example I used in one of my firms. Top reason why we're still stuck with this problem is this thing right here called a spreadsheet. Okay, we all live and breathe off of this stuff. And I'm not just saying that because I'm at Kintone and we know that one of the things they're trying to disrupt is spreadsheets. This is happening everywhere. People are recognizing how much of their organization is tied to tools and technology and decisions that are built off of this. It's largely manual in nature, so it's error prone. And I thought I'd share an example of that. This is a headline. Companies could lose billions of crappy spreadsheets. So let's talk about what that looks like. There was an analysis done. Someone's going to have to raise their hand if they've seen this before. There was an analysis done. A group of data scientists got access to 15,770 spreadsheets from one firm, and they did a data analysis on it. Okay. The first thing they figured out is that number is actually pretty small. Of the 15,000 spreadsheets, there were 80,000 worksheets among them. So a multiplying effect, a lot more data in there. Of the 15,000, you might say, oh, some of this was to showcase a chart or visual. And you're right, because about a third of them were not really formula driven, but you had code in 9,000 of these spreadsheets, right? When you put formulas in or you put macros into your spreadsheet, it's basically code with formulas, okay? How much of this code? Well, of those 9,000 spreadsheets, they had 913,000 formulas in them. That's 913,000 lines of code. Let's look at it that way. It's a lot of code in those spreadsheets. The next thing they did was look for errors in the code. Okay, now, these are the things that Excel will tell you about, right? They will tell you you're dividing by 0 or there's some kind of error with the formula. They won't tell you that there's an underlying misstep in the calculation that you put in, or there's a mistake in the copy and pasting that you've done with that formula. Okay, so that's just the tip of the iceberg, and of the 9,000 spreadsheets, 2,000 of them had some kind of syntax error in the calculations. The company they analyzed was Enron. Okay, now I don't think there's a causality effect there, but it's just very interesting when you look at companies that are heavily into spreadsheets for decision making, and you look at two factors. One is the cost it takes to actually create those calculations, and the second is what's the impact of errors in them. Okay, to me, the average corporation that needs to win with technology has to find ways of bringing the skill set in and growing beyond their IT department. And I'm the CIO saying that. All right, every one of my departments had too much work for it to do. Very often, because the IT departments that I was working in were building customer-facing technologies. So things like analysis of the data in our CRM and in our ERP was never happening because our technologists and our data scientists were focused on customer experiences. Things like how do you build workflow applications to track different things wasn't happening in our organization because, again, we were forcing most of our IT to do customer-facing work. If you're going to win with technology, you need to take that technology capability outside of the IT department and outside of the data science group, if you have one, and realize that you have a much larger organization that can leverage these technologies. Here's an example of one. This is a data viz technology, okay? Looks nicer than a spreadsheet, okay? It's clickable, it's highlighting data for you. But the most important aspects of a technology like this is not that it looks better, but you can automate this, right? You can put this out to your organization, have them be able to drill into data, and make better decisions off of it. This is actually data coming from my website. So if you're looking for insights off of it, this is one of the dashboards that I use personally to say which of my content drives more traffic when I put it out there, so new newsy-oriented content, and which of my content is more green-oriented and has more traffic as I go on. And it actually influences my editorial calendar about what I write about. And it turns out that lots of organizations have this question and dilemma: how do you build up your content marketing program? And this is a dashboard I actually help people with to say, you need to do some things that are focused on near term, and you need to do some things that are going to bring customers in through SEO and SEM capabilities over the long haul. But I put it up in here because the main difference is you're putting a tool out, you're not putting a spreadsheet out, you're putting something that they can use on a daily basis. And as soon as you're able to make these things clickable, it means different people in the organization can look at the data differently. Okay. How do you go about doing this? This is stems from a small part of the book, but also from a blog post that I did. And it talks about how to build citizen data science programs in the organization. So we talked Agile earlier, right? And Agile started out with a backlog of problems. What do you need to do for a particular customer, and how do you fulfill it? Okay, in data science programs, it starts with a question. Which users of our website are driving the most clicks into our registration process, and where did they come from? That's a question that an analysis can get you an answer to. I am producing 10 pieces of content every month. Which pieces of content over the last 6 months have driven the most transactions and the most conversions? That's another type of analysis. All right, come up with those 10 questions, okay, and decide which of those become actionable. Something I can do differently if I know the answer to it, right? So if I knew which content was going to produce the most traffic, the most clicks on my website, I would probably spend more of my editorial calendar writing more of that content. If I knew what channels, if I had a marketing budget and I knew what channels were going to drive the most click-throughs into my registration process, I'd probably tune my spend based on those activities. So now you're going to start seeing things that you can do based on the outcome of the data without knowing how hard or how difficult it will be to get that data. And that's where the Agile process really kicks in, because as you send somebody off to actually do this work, you can see an impact. What is their ability to provide results? And if the data is complicated or the ability to integrate the data becomes more cumbersome, you can actually readjust your Agile priorities and say, let's go after a different problem at this point. Okay. The heart of it is, though, again, most organizations do not have sufficient data scientists to be able to do this work. And how do you bring a practice like Agile and a set of tools to them to be able to execute on it? This is what it looks like in the book in more detail. Okay, so there's actually 4 big parts to this. I talked about one in terms of technology, picking technologies that can be used outside of the IT and data science programs. I talked about practices, things like Agile. One of the more important things that is I talk about in the book is you can have all the tools and the technologies out there, but if key people, if our stakeholders aren't using them, then how are you going, it's not going to make an impact, right? You're going to put more technology and practice and insights out there, but they're not being used. So one of the things I typically do in organizations is train the executives to start looking at the underlying data, all right? And the way I go about doing it as a CIO is I make sure that PowerPoints are eliminated out of the management groups. Take the translation layer out. And if you're going to go look at financial data, have the CFO put it up there directly from the ERP. Have the head of sales pull it directly from the CRM and showcase it. Now, very often they're going to bring in their operating people to come in and actually run the tools because they don't know how to run them. But get them to actually use and leverage the data that's actually in the systems rather than having somebody shift that into a spreadsheet or shift that into a PowerPoint and use that as the framework for decision making. What that inevitably does is it does 2 things. I described the first one, which is they're going to find data quality issues, which is a good thing, because now you got top-down pressure to improve the underlying processes and the data that go along with it. The other thing that's going to end up happening is you're going to ask more questions. Okay, and that's a good thing, right? Having more people, including people at the top, ask more questions that are data-oriented leads to finding people in the organization who can fulfill those things and finding technologies that can keep up with it. Okay, and so those are the 3 circles on the outside. The middle part is where, how many people are in IT in this group? I didn't think I'd have a lot of them. 1 person in IT, okay. So what happens if how many spreadsheets did I say? 9,000 spreadsheets becomes 1,000 dashboards. Did you win? Right? It's just another technology, another tool. What happens if 9,000 access databases becomes 3,000 Kintone apps? Okay. What happens when you start versioning these things and adding more capabilities to it? Right? These are things that technologists have actually worked with for a long time. It's the ability to version and communicate a change around an application. It's around being able to test things before you put it in front of users. It's around putting some controls in place so that people know what exists in the enterprise so that you don't go out and recreate it. And so that you know that if something was created, you know when is an appropriate time to sunset it. That's what governance means here, among other things like who should get access to it. And if you're creating data, what is the data privacy around that data? Okay, so to demystify, if you've ever heard the word data governance, those are the things that data governance tries to answer. And it's largely around policies, and it's around executing around those policies, but a big part of it is how the IT organization is working in this more democratized world and taking practices they've done before and helping people outside of the IT group perform similar functions. Because as you build things outside of IT, it's very likely that you end up with similar situations that happened inside IT with technologies. Good? So I'm going to end with the last program in here, right? Which is, to me, the thing, who was I talking to earlier today? One of the things that has made me successful as a CIO for a very long time, which is putting low-code and no-code platforms in. I have been doing that since 2005 was the first platform I put in. And it was to solve a very difficult problem, which was I had nobody in the IT group who could build applications out for our sales team. We were operating, at that time, an ad network. That ad network needed a customer-facing part to it. It needed an internal facing part, needed a part for our sales group. We needed to build a workflow to really make this work, and I wasn't going to be able to throw Java programmers at it. So I found a low code platform and I started building it. And then what I found at that time was 3 or 4 other CIOs doing the same thing. They had found the secret that we could build really rapid apps with these platforms and solve really difficult problems with it by not doing it the traditional way, by using technologies that simplified the ability to build applications out. My next role in McGraw-Hill, I ended up trying to solve 2 other problems, okay? One was I was being asked to use a very large number of enterprise technologies that just didn't work. Okay, they were too slow, they were too cumbersome, too complicated, but I still had the same problems. I needed to manage assets in the IT organization, licenses, desktops, all the things that the IT organization needed to have, and I didn't want to do it in spreadsheets because I knew they changed over time. I had a portfolio I had to manage, 75 different projects that I needed to be able to report on and tell people what the status was at any given moment when I didn't even know if I had time that week to speak to a project manager. So to replace a lot of the enterprise tools that really wasn't working at a single business unit level, I started building those applications out with my group to be able to do that and roll them out. And then as we rolled those out, people in my organization came back to me and said, we need to do this in the marketing department. We need to keep track of all of the assets that we're buying, the media assets that we're buying, so we know what the rights are for us to republish them. How can we do that? And so I found somebody in the group who was a little bit more technology savvy, and I gave him access to the tool and said, go build the application. Okay, and so that person went on to build 2 more. That person went on to train a few other people in other organizations to learn how to use the same tool. By the time we ended up selling that business, by the time we sold it, there were 15 applications built by 4 groups to do things that were core to their group. So these are the reasons I do it, okay? It's IT departments are understaffed. I want to bring more automation to the group, but I fundamentally believe that there are people outside of IT who want to do IT today, who have the capabilities to do it, that want to be more efficient, and they're willing to do it. And I avoid the problems of shadow IT by giving them the tools to be able to do it. Okay. Here's another example of it. This is a tool I built last week for about 5 minutes. This is actually a tool I handed out at Business Week, built on a different platform, and I built it on Kintone last week in about 5 minutes. So we were hiring a lot of people at that time at Business Week, and I went to the hiring manager at the time, the recruiter, and saying, we're not getting good resumes, and she came back to me and says, you're getting plenty of resumes, your team's not responsive. They're not signing up to do interviews, they're not giving me the feedback. Without the feedback, I don't know how to tune my strategy to bring candidates in. And I said, this is crazy. I need to hire 15 people in 3 months, how am I going to do this? So I put a tool up that did pretty much what this did, and I built this one in 5 minutes. The other one took longer. So you can come ask me the platform I built that one in. But what this basically did was it allowed me as the manager to see, number one, how responsive my team was, right? When a candidate came in and the recruiter put the resume up, how long did it take for her to get responses, okay? When they finished an interview, okay, I asked them to go into the tool and give me their feedback. And I think that's what you're seeing here. It's been a while since I looked at it. Give me quantitative and qualitative feedback about the candidate within the hour after you interviewed them, because I need to make quick decisions. This is a very difficult hiring market. If this is a candidate that we all like, I want to be able to go back to the recruiter and say, get that person back here in here for whatever round 2 or round 3 of interviews are in here, okay? If there was indecisiveness within the group, I could see it in here, right? And have somebody come in and facilitate a discussion around the candidate to see what are the people's real feelings. If the person was clearly not a good fit, would show up in here very quickly, Okay, this is an example of a workflow that lasted 3 months, would have never been able to hire 15 people that quickly in an enterprise, in a software development group at that time without a tool like this. And just one of the many examples. I think actually one of the chapters in the book lays out 6 other examples of tools that I built on citizen platforms that are usually part of an enterprise strategy, but things that I needed to actually go out and build. So why you guys are here and what you're doing here are things that are very strong to my heart. So some last words on digital transformation. I shared with you some of the hard execution parts. The hardest part is really around organizational change. Okay, that's really about as you're building new products and services, or as you're asking people to do things differently in the organization, how are you going to gain adoption around it? Okay. I have a client that is instrumenting new mobile tools that are going out to a construction workforce of about 4,000. About 1,000 of them are foremen, and they're going to be told how to use timekeeping out of a mobile tool. Something that they really don't want to do. Okay? That's an example of organizational change. When you need to get something out into your workforce that they're not naturally doing, and explain to them and sell them on the idea of using a technology that they haven't done or used before, and why it's important for them, and why it's important for the company, and ultimately what good it delivers, and how do they provide feedback around it. Okay? That's the organizational change part. Agile practices and culture. I showed you practices, but culture is a whole nother piece to this, right? So I gave you the Business Week example, but the Business Week example was really about everybody wanted everything immediately, okay? Everybody wanted their feature done exactly the way they wanted it done. And unfortunately, that's not Agile, right? Agile is about the team committing to what it can get done in a certain period of time, and trying to get the most important things out faster. Okay, that's a cultural statement. I want to get the most important things out faster. And the reason is I want to bring it to market faster. I want to be more competitive faster. I want to fail faster. I want to succeed faster and capture feedback faster. That's against the mindset of people who come in with a perspective of it needs to be perfect the first time. It needs to be exactly what I envision or exactly what I'm picturing. And every organization has those people who are thinking that way. And you're going to have to work to illustrate by example how to make those changes. There's some people in my role who actually argue that technologies don't matter. I argue that technologies matter a lot. The Forrester paper you put up has 16 technologies in business, business development. They're not all doing the same things, and they're not all doing the same things well. Okay, if you look, there's a person who puts out one of those logo diagrams of all the marketing technologies that exist out there, and every year that number doubles. There's like 3,500 of them on there, or maybe even 5,000 of them on there, and every box has like 20 or 30 competitors in there. Okay, technology selections really do matter. And you really have to try these tools out from, does it deliver what it's supposed to do? Is it easy to use? Okay. And is it a company I want to be aligned with that has a lot of different things to it? Does it integrate well into the ecosystem? Okay. And so is it secure? However you can manage measuring the security around it. So yes, you want to move fast, but picking the right technologies to work with is an art. Okay. One of the reasons I did the test on Kintone was I wanted to see, can I learn the tool in 15 minutes or less? So thumbs up to the Kintone group. It's actually a thing that I do with almost every technology vendor. If I can't learn your technology in under an hour, I'm probably not putting it into my enterprise. I don't have time to send people to long training classes to learn 4 degrees of certifications to be able to do the first thing. That applies to all the technologies that I do. And then you have to adopt a culture of winning with data. So that's the heart of the book. I want to thank Kintone for sponsoring it. Those of you who are here can come pick up a copy of it. I'm going to sit and sign books if people want me to sign their book. But a lot of this is spelled out in more detail in the book. And that's it. Thank you. I have questions? I think I have a few minutes of. Yeah.
What are some of your best practices for vetting out dedicated technology stacks, such as a sales technology stack, marketing technology stack, an analytics stack? You know, the list goes on and on and on. Like, how do you go about doing that?
Yeah. I usually start by looking at the most strategic things that the company has to do, and to what degree those things are truly proprietary. Okay, and home in on a strategy around that element, right? Most important and most proprietary, and that's most likely going to land into buckets of platforms and technologies where I know I need to be able to go and customize or configure or do something above and beyond that platform. And then I try to understand exactly what I'm doing above and beyond it. Okay, for everything else, and this is actually the harder part, I try to go back to that same group and say, we need to do a great job with technologies that are really simple to operate. Okay, and the reason is, if you can't get a differentiating value out of what you need to do in that platform, then putting the expense in to fully customize it becomes something that's very difficult to support long term. So somebody earlier this morning talked about a platform that starts with the word sales. Okay, I love that platform. Okay, but when somebody asks me, should I use sales for this, for our CRM? I start asking them questions like, what is it that's proprietary around their practice? What is it about the ecosystems that sales has a good ecosystem? What is it about those other platforms and technologies that plug into it that are going to enhance your ability to leverage that platform? And if they don't come back with good answers around that ecosystem question and around what's unique about their practice, there's a long tail of technologies out there that I can go use that are sometimes a lot easier to use and often a lot cheaper to go use, right? The biggest place I usually have that question is around the website itself, right? So do I go customize a website with JavaScript, right? Everybody, if you're going to go and satisfy your head of marketing and make a website do exactly what the head of marketing wants, you're probably building a custom website, okay? Custom websites are expensive, and they're difficult to maintain, okay? But a lot of content-oriented websites can do just as well with a CMS that's an open platform with lots of plugins from the open source community if you want to live within that box, right? And if you're putting out content-oriented websites, my last firm, Greenwich Associates, was doing that. And I said, there's nothing unique about what we're doing here. We're just putting content up. It needs to have a certain taxonomy to it. It needs to have the branding look and feel. But I don't need to have .NET programmers doing it. And so we found platforms to do that with. So you have to understand the nuances of the platforms, but it starts with where are you going to get strategic value by putting in more proprietary capability in and working backwards from that. Other questions?
You're a CIO, and you mentioned how focusing on having the requirements perfect up front really isn't effective. I find that to be a unique perspective from a CIO.
Thank you.
Because I talk to the opposite.
Yeah.
I'm tired of the idea of having the requirements perfectly vetted out before building anything.
Uh-huh.
And I know from experience that's not effective. And the way I sum it up is requirements are theory at best.
Uh-huh.
So how do you prevail upon other people in your role to see things that way? Because I find that's one of the biggest barriers to being really effective is convincing the man with the budget and the technology power to do things the way you described in your presentation.
Yeah. So if you're talking to that CIO, one thing I'd encourage them to do is to get out of the office a little bit and go meet some other CIOs, because if that person met other CIOs 3 to 5 years ago, they'd all be talking the same way, right? What's your change management practice, and what's all your steps that you're going to do before you put anything in my data center? All right, if you go talk to CIOs today, they talk about Agile like they know Agile. And a lot of them do, and a lot of them are starting to use it well, but they didn't write the book on that. They learned it over time because of the pressures facing them, right? So if there are still CIOs out there that don't get that, the first thing I would say is get out in the field or go to a customer and see what the impact is. Customer could be an internal customer too, but go see what the impact of being slow or being ineffective or having a poor user experience is, and understand the impact to them. Or go to a CIO conference and see and learn what other CIOs are doing and realize, I'm behind the curve in how I'm operating. My first chapter in the book talks about that. Actually, it's in the intro, and it says, if you're a CIO not doing things that are fast customer facing, you're probably going to lose your job over the next few years. Okay, and that's happening. When you read as a CIO magazines and articles about new CIOs coming in, there are CIOs coming in with digital experiences and not data center experiences. So I think the tide is turning a little bit there. It may, some organizations slower and others faster. The other place you can impact it is to find areas outside of core mainstream areas where you can experiment a little bit, right? And try to come up with, maybe the website is not top of mind for him or her, and say, let's try to do something different over here. Okay, and your last recourse is to go find somewhere else that is a little bit more progressive, because unfortunately a lot of companies that don't get it won't be around in 10 years.
I'd like to offer another opportunity in that question.
Sure.
Answer, which is to talk with your people below you that report to you, that are on the ground, and they're doing the face-to-face every day with whoever they are with. Because
Yep.
these folks are the ones that are driving this car, and the way that I learned the stuff that you're talking about is that I had to manage them and manage people above me. And when you're in the position of the middle person, project manager type person, I wasn't in a big company, I was in a tiny nonprofit. I did what you did in whatever numbers are above you and whatever numbers are below you. And so I found that my skills were increased, and I was more successful when I advocated for the people on the ground and turned it into the language that the people above me could hear, because I handled the financing and all the money. So I got to say, this is why this is important for you to think about. And guess what? You got 6 incredible staff people down there generating the kind of ideas that we need to listen to.
Yeah. So,
Just another option.
well, what she's advocating for is find supporters who are going to work with you on this cause, right?
Or support the people that have
Right.
ideas, because they're on the front line, and you go be their advocate and say, okay, I'm management, and my people are telling me this, and I'm going to listen to them. How about you listening to me and what I tell you?
Yeah, it's a great suggestion. And by the way, the other part of it is finding out what is it that CIO is afraid of, okay, and finding ways to address that in the practice itself. Very often, it's things like change controls, separations of duties, security. None of this stuff circumvents that, okay? In fact, there are ways to do it more proactively when you plug those into the process. So, but the way their mindset is, I got to think of those things first and then figure out how to service customers second. And that's the part that you have to help turn around. So hope that was helpful. I think I'm out of time. I'll be here for half an hour if you want to come up and say hello or ask me another question. Thank you, and thanks, Kintone.